Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to A Mighty Blaze. This is Mighty Mysteries on A Mighty Blaze. I am your host, Hank Phillippi Ryan, the USA Today bestselling author of 13 thrillers, the newest being Her Perfect Life, which is out right now. Oh, thank you, Nita Prose. We are so thrilled, and you are so lucky, and we are so honored to be here today to talk with Nita Prose, whose debut novel, The Maid, is out today. It is pub day for The Maid. This book, let me quickly tell you, is endearing and charming and wonderful and mysterious and unique. And truly, if I could hug an iPad, I would hug this iPad. This is an instant classic novel. I loved it so much. I can't even begin to tell you all. Don't leave now, but after the show is over, run, and get your copy of The Maid. You have never read anything like this, and it is unforgettable. It is unforgettable and wonderful. Welcome, Nita. I will let you talk. Welcome to A Mighty Blaze. Happy launch day. I see you're number one in Kindle and number one in books, and you're a Good Morning America choice and most anticipated book by, I don't know, everybody, the New York Times and Glamour and Pop Sugar and everyone. Pamela Klingerhorn is here now saying it is brilliant, and it absolutely is. Are you having a nice day?
It is quite an overwhelming day, and it is really, really wonderful. But I have to say, like, getting the love from readers, and I can see some of my people out there joining now, including Pamela and Christina and all these people I've gotten to know who have just showered me with the gracious love of readership, and that has been so utterly heartwarming, because that's why we do this, isn't it, Hank?
Well, we sit and write by ourselves and wonder if we had a good idea, and then hope that we're right. And then we put the book out there and say, so now what do you think? And then we wait for the response. And I'm not sure I've ever seen a response, the kind of response that The Maid has gotten. It is so touching, and people love Molly the maid, and people love the milieu, and people love the setting, and people love what an endearing character she is. And I want to talk about all of that in a minute, but let me just say to all of you, if you are new to A Mighty Blaze, you have picked the best day ever to be here, our first show of 2022. If you can believe, we're still in the pandemic, but we started A Mighty Blaze. Jenna Blum and Caroline Levitt, the two powerhouse founders of A Mighty Blaze, 2 years ago almost now, to keep us talking, keep us discovering books, keep us meeting new authors and reading more books and staying together as a community. And we will persevere. And that is why we are here today with the fabulous Nita Prose. She is a longtime editor, 20 years, I think you said.
Something like that.
Authors. I found out a little while ago that some of my dear friends are her authors, like Samantha Bailey and Marissa Stapley. So you must have been so happy with their wild successes.
Oh my goodness. You know what? The wonderful thing is that, you think that this industry would be very backstabbing and such, and it's nothing of the sort. Book people are just the best people in the world, and writers are so kind to each other because we know the struggles. And so people like Sam and Marissa have been just by my side the whole time, and I can't thank them enough.
Sully is saying, got my book today. Carla saying, I love The Maid. Gail is here, and Anissa is here, and Arlene is here. This is so marvelous. Sherry and Bozania and Sully. This is Sharon Person. These are readers who are loving this book, and if they haven't read it, are eager to read it and are in for a treat. Just set the book up a little bit for us. Who the main character is and where it takes place and what the basis of the story is.
Sure. Well, it features Molly, and she is a socially awkward hotel room maid whose world really gets turned upside down when she stumbles across a body, a very dead guy who's dead in his hotel room bed. And, this is a book about what it means to be the same as everyone else and yet entirely different. And I think as a whodunit, as a murder mystery, it is a little bit different because the murder and the mystery can only be solved through a connection to the human heart.
And that is such a wonderfully charming part of this book. It's not only heartbreaking and funny and full of love and full of relationships and such a tour de force of voice. I have never read anything like this, but it is also a good, smart, solid mystery. So the balance of those two elements of the book is so perfectly done. We'll get to the character Molly in a minute, but where did the germ of the idea of this book come from?
Well, it happened in 2019. I was on a business trip and I went to London and I was staying at a hotel there. And I left my hotel room, went to a meeting, came back, and I opened my hotel room door and I completely startled the maid who was cleaning it. And this is the really embarrassing part. I had left my track pants in a tangled mess on my bed because I'd gone for a run just before my meeting. And she held them into her hands and she stepped back into a shadowy corner. And I looked at her and I thought, what an intimate and invisible job it is to be a roommate. I mean, just by cleaning my room every day, she knew so much about me, but I knew nothing about her. So that's how it started. And then a few days later, I was on my plane ride home after a great trip. And suddenly that's when I heard it, Hank. And it was Molly's voice. And it was clean. It was crisp. It was precise. It was polished to perfection. And I couldn't believe it. It was like a bolt out of the blue. I didn't have any paper with me. So I grabbed the napkin from under my drink and I wrote the prologue down in a single burst. And I didn't even know it while I was doing it. I'm writing. I got to the end. And then it was only later that I realized I'd just begun my debut novel.
I mean, as an editor for many years, you've talked to so many authors about how their thought processes work and where ideas come from and how to translate those into actual novels. But I was at an interview where Stephen King and Lee Child were interviewing each other. And they each said separately, and they were surprised to hear it from each other, that at some time when they began their books, it felt like they were almost downloading a voice from some universe that wasn't them, and that they really didn't know where that came from. It sounds like that's what happened to you.
Yeah, I mean, I talk about this a lot with my authors, and I call it the river. And sometimes you go down to the river and you just don't know what you're going to catch that day. But you go down to the river another day and suddenly you catch this giant fish. And I think that river is there. It exists. It's part of our humanity. It's this flow of creativity. And sometimes you can catch the most amazing things in that river.
It's interesting because your brain connected with the maid who was cleaning your room, and other people might have said, that's so interesting, or more likely nothing at all. No synapses would have gotten jumped, but that person became a character to you who turned into being Molly the maid. And that voice that you just portrayed so gorgeously, how did you, and I understand that you didn't decide, that Molly decided for you that that's who she was going to be, but talk a little bit about the development of her character and what the sort of pivotal parts of her are to you.
Well, she is a bit of a misfit. She's somebody who has trouble reading social cues. And yet she is such a diligent worker. She works so hard and she always does her best. And of course, she is obsessive about cleaning. She loves cleaning a little bit more than I do. And so, she goes about her work at the Regency Grand Hotel, this posh 5-star luxury, sophisticated hotel. And yet nobody ever pays her any mind whatsoever. It's as though she's completely invisible. What I really wanted the reader to do was to step into her eyes, to see from behind them, and to feel what it was like to be a maid and to be invisible in plain sight. And I think, I hoped that above and beyond the murder mystery aspects, that if you just live for a while as Molly. You come to love her.
And you do let us into her life so gorgeously and so subtly and so carefully from the moment that she unwraps her uniform and revels in how perfect her uniform is in that plastic bag every day, and how much she enjoys setting up the little shower caps and the little soaps and the folded towels and the graded sizes. And you really put us into her life. But she always wanted to be a maid, but she doesn't understand how invisible she is to other people, and how much her pride in her work is often ignored. Talk a little bit about, how did you know that? How did you understand what maids do and what they go through, and the good ones versus the ones that steal the tips from the others?
Well, I think the maid is a metaphor, and it's a metaphor for all kinds of workers. There's so many people who toil away and do so much for us. And gosh, have we not learned that in the last 2 years? And yet, so often they're undervalued. And I've always been very attuned for that, for all kinds of reasons. But I'm also the kind of person who studies carefully. So, I can't help but be fascinated, for instance, by the ecosystem of something like a hotel. The Regency Grand Hotel that I portray in this book is not unlike so many hotels that we've all stepped into at various times. It really does have one facade, which belongs to the guest on the outside. But, the guest is living in an entirely different universe from the workers who toil away diligently to create this facade of sophistication for the guests who are passing through. And so the difference of experience between the highly valued guest and the lowly maid, it's as though they're living on two different planets. And that really interested me.
I mean, you take us into the back of the house of the hotel, and that's the part that people who stay in hotels never really see. But there's a whole culture, and there's a whole hierarchy that's in the back of the house, and that comes into play so beautifully in this book as well. The characters, I mean, it's sort of like Forrest Gump meets Agatha Christie meets Grand Hotel with a little bit of Columbo.
Yes.
So adorably put in. How did you put those pieces together? What did you mean to do? How did you give us this? We're talking about The Maid, you all. Nita Prose's brand new debut novel that came out just today, and we're celebrating her debut today, as is everyone else on the planet. How did you put together those puzzle pieces?
Well, I guess I went to the influences that I love and adore, So Agatha Christie, who you mentioned, is a huge influence. And I just love her brilliant phrasing, her ability to capture a character in about 3 or 4 words if it's a short story. I mean, she was just incredible at that. Never mind her sleuthing skills. But she could create an ensemble cast that was so iconic and yet stylized and elevated in a way. And that really interested me. I guess it's kind of a mixture of Agatha Christie with a little bit of the film Knives Out. And maybe then I added a smattering of the board game Clue. I want readers to have that experience of guessing. Is it the bartender with a knife in the restaurant, or is it the maid with a pillow in the bedroom?
And you do that with their names so nicely too.
Yeah. So I wanted to create a world where, those sort of influences feel, on the one hand, immediately recognizable from those influences I just mentioned. But on the other hand, I also wanted to surprise the reader by having characters that maybe had some depth and some hurt and some pain and a whole character arc of revelation ahead of them. So they weren't just, Colonel Mustard in the ballroom. There was something more about each of them that I hope, if I've done things right, comes to light.
And it worked so beautifully, because you do peel back the layers of many of the characters, and you begin to understand them. And I don't want to say who, but a couple of them were surprising on every level. And again, heartbreaking and gorgeous and tender and loving and so surprising in every way. But let's go back to Molly as you can see on the cover. This is Molly. I always imagine that sneaking by very quickly on her way to do her job as diligently as she does. She has a way of speaking that's incredibly precise and a little bit old fashioned. She lives with her gran initially. And her she thinks in a different way and sees the world in a different way than many people do. Talk a bit about how you developed that and how you meant what you meant to do and succeeded at. I didn't mean meant to do, but what you succeeded at so beautifully.
Well, I think Molly is somebody who has had limited world experience, not through any of her own fault. And I wanted to portray that. It was important for me not to signal too much about what is different about Molly at the beginning of the book or anywhere in the copy. And that is because I really wanted the reader to live as her and to focus on how we are the same as Molly instead of maybe so much about how we're different from her. But I think the other interesting thing about Molly is some of her limitations end up being her greatest strengths. She is capable of doing things and of certain amounts of kindness and forgiveness that boggle the mind. And I guess in creating her, I wanted to create a kind of idol who on the surface of things seems like somebody who might have some deficits, some personal deficits and some challenges, which she does. But on the other hand, she is a lion. She is not weak. She is so unbelievably strong. And of course, I can't say exactly what I'm talking about, but these are discoveries that I hope the reader makes as we move through the novel.
And it's all about her relationship, not only with herself, but with the people in her lives, how we all need to be a part of something and need to be loved and appreciated, and how power and money and greed can be used against someone who is especially vulnerable, as Molly appears to be.
Yes, and is in some fundamental ways. But as we learn, in other ways, she has more strength, stamina, empathy than most people.
One of the things that's so much fun to read with Molly is how literally she takes every word. She's not very comfortable with sarcasm, and she's not comfortable with being dismissed, and she's just takes everything as absolutely at face value. So if a police officer, for instance, says, I know about the dirt at the hotel, she says, well, yes, I do. I know more about that than anyone. And I honestly laughed out loud at that. And there are so many moments like that. But what you're also doing so gorgeously is showing us a different way of looking at the world, and how maybe, we think we're so smart and so sophisticated when really we're missing a lot.
That's right. And I think when we open our eyes to the fact that our worldview isn't every worldview, that's about opening the heart to be empathetic to all different kinds of people. One of the lessons I learned a long time ago, this was before I was an editor. I worked with special needs students of many kinds. They had very specialized needs in some cases. And I remember, some formative experiences where I'd take my students out in the world on a field trip. And it was so shocking to me to see how they were treated outside of a classroom. And they were so resilient to being teased or being treated as other. And that is an experience that really stuck with me. But the most important part that I learned about that was their resilience and strength. They were so capable of adapting to our normative ways. They were so strong and so resilient. And I grew to appreciate them in such a manner and to respect that resilience. And I guess in some ways, in the creation of Molly, I'm trying to honor that.
And you do that by allowing us to see her understand or learn to understand the difference between someone laughing at her and someone laughing with her.
Yes.
When she realizes that those two are different things, and one is not so good and one is lovely, and how sometimes she might have been mistaken about that. I mean, this is a book where I really laughed. Laughed out loud, and really cried. It's incredibly touching the book in so many ways and so surprising. How did you feel emotionally as these pages unfolded?
Well, it's interesting because the way I write, I knew some things and I didn't know other things when I was starting out. So as I've mentioned, I knew my main character, I knew the Regency Grand Hotel, I knew even who did it. I knew that.
Oh,
And I had a couple of other tent poles along the way, but there were all sorts of things that I didn't know. I knew, for instance, that Gran, Molly's grandmother, was going to be a formative character, and that there was going to be a subplot about that, which deeply, fits into the fabric of the story in some very meaningful and hopefully poignant ways. And I remember thinking to myself halfway through the book, we're getting close to me having to write that scene. And really just sort of walking around the house and realizing this is going to be a hard scene to write. Like, this is going to take every ounce of me. All of the fabric of my heart is going to go into that scene. And I knew that one was coming. And it's funny how those things keep you going. They're out there and they're frightening at sometimes for a writer, but they also keep you moving forward.
There are a couple of scenes like that. First of all, I got goosebumps when you were talking about that, because of course I know what you're talking about. And you all, when I look over here, I'm looking at the comments, and you all will too, as soon as you read The Maid by Nita Prose, which we are telling you right now, you will not want to miss this book. It is marvelous. The settings, not only of the hotel, which of course is gorgeous and instantly cinematic. We'll talk about that in a minute. But Molly's apartment will just make you cry. And there are some scenes that take place in the living room and the kitchen of Molly's apartment that will make you cry, of people coming together and people realizing things about each other. Those ensemble scenes are so wonderful in the book. Were those fun to write?
Oh, they were so delicious. They were so delicious. I've had comments from readers say there are a few characters in this book that I wanted to kill at certain points. And believe you me, I did too. I want you to experience that anger on Molly's behalf. But when we get to the second half of the book, my goal is to give you something back, readers. And so there's a beautiful unity. There is a cast of characters who come to Molly's side. And in the way that Molly is an angel to several people in the book, she also has angels. And I don't know, hopefully we all have them in our real lives.
A beautiful unity. I'm writing this down and putting this on my computer on a little yellow sticky, because that is what the essence of this book is. It all comes together so gorgeously, and then so gorgeously yet again. Another thing that's so stalwart about Molly is her true moral sense. I mean, her values and her justice and her sense of right and wrong, which again, because it's in Molly's head, is so pure and so lovely. That couldn't have just downloaded in your brain. That must have been something that you really thought about.
It was a metaphor that evolved. She sees things in black and white, dirty and clean, good and evil. And yet that's only how it seems at the beginning of the book. By the end, we understand that Molly, in her peculiar way, and she has her own moral being fully developed from the outset of the book. And her moral compass is so tuned to her north. And it may not be the same moral compass as we all have, but hers is so just absolutely primed to what she believes in. And I wanted a character to have that certainty about them.
Well, there's right and wrong. There is forgiveness. There's how you deal with other people. There's respect. And there is when someone does something bad, they have done something bad. You don't do these things. But then again, there's forgiveness and there's justice, and there's Molly's justice and there's legal justice. And she teaches that to people.
She does. Yes.
I see we have so many questions, and I don't want to run out of time. And I do want to get to a couple of things. You've been such a successful editor with so many wonderful authors working with who you've worked with. What have you learned? We only have 25 more hours because I'm sure there's so many things. But what have you learned from those authors and dealing with their lives and their paths and their stories that helped you with this?
Well, everything. In my acknowledgments, I credit my writers with teaching me pretty much everything. Between my writers and the publishing business, and the great colleagues that I've worked with in this business, they have taught me everything. I joke that, this book only took me 5 months to write, from the first words on that napkin to the final words. It took me 5 months. However, giant caveat, it took me 20 years to learn the craft of writing, to be able to write this book in 5 months. And that is a credit to my authors and the work that we've done together. And, the way they've let me in to their storytelling processes to help them find the story, to go to that river with them and find it.
And then when you saw the Maid in your London hotel room, that was you stepped a toe into the river and the river says, yes, this is yours. This is for you.
Yeah. And I could have run away and gone, oh no. And then maybe somebody else would have gone to the river and caught that fish.
Yeah, no. You also didn't say, this is not what I do. When you were, you're the editor, you're the guide, you're the teacher, you're the mentor, you're the shepherd. You're not the writer. And at the point where you got a good idea and you knew enough to know it was a good idea, the other thing that you learn over 20 years, yes, this will work.
Yes.
You didn't say, I'm an editor, not a writer. You decided you were a writer.
Yeah, I mean, I've always done both. I'm a ghostwriter, so I've, worked in the nonfiction realm for quite a long time, writing for other people, celebrities and politicians and the like. So I'm familiar with the writing process, but writing fiction is an entirely different beast. I did have some inkling that, maybe at some point, at some time in my career, maybe I will write a novel. But it was really when I had that lightning bolt strike of Molly's voice in my head that I knew the timing was right, the voice was right, and that this was a novel that I was going to try to get down on the page. That being said, let me tell you, Hank, how many people did I tell over those 5 months of writing? 0. I told nobody. I didn't tell my partner. I didn't tell my friends. And I certainly didn't tell my colleagues in the book publishing industry, because in my head was that voice. You know this voice, ladies. You know it. That voice that said, oh my God, this is, you're going to put your work out there and the agents and publishers are going to get back to you and say, oh, it's so lovely. And we all know what that means. And then I'm going to have to continue my job as an editor, with that embarrassing feeling of, oh, my work didn't live up to the mark. But, of course, eventually I did finish. I did actually tell people. I put my work out there and, I received a good response. But there is a big difference between being a writer and an editor. And that difference is blindness. I talk about the maze a lot with my authors. So there's a maze. The author is standing in front of the maze. And the maze is the story. And you have to go in there blind as a writer. And you don't know, if you turn left over there, you could lose 6 months and come to a dead end and never get to the end of your story. But the editor is outside on a ladder looking down, and she can tell you, if you turn left, you're going to hit a dead end. So don't do that. Go over there instead. Wow, did I get a real sense of just how much bravery and vulnerability it takes to stand in front of that maze, not know what's going on, and just go ahead regardless.
But it is kind of fabulous when it works. I mean, I am dearly in love with my editor. And if I send her a manuscript and she'll say, oh, I love this book about redemption. And I say,
huh?
Yeah, redemption, totally. That's exactly what I meant about it. And she'll say, what if this? And I say, no. Oh, yeah. And then I do it and I say, you are a genius, Kristen. You are a genius. And she says, no, you did it. You just didn't know it.
Correct.
And that is just the joy of my life. So I love that you got to see both So, well, did you had an editor though? How did you work with that editor? Oh
I
no,
have three. I have three editors. So I have an editor in the US, an editor in Canada, and an editor in the UK. And this is not unusual. Maybe some of you know that, maybe some of you don't. Sometimes writers will have more than one editor, and they were absolutely brilliant. And needless to say, it was really, really important to me to have editors that I trusted and that I knew would shape this into what I hoped it would become. And they just did the most splendid job. They were all there on that ladder, and they helped me so much to see the way.
I was going to say something about it was a tightrope to walk, because Molly is a very interesting character that could have gone either way, and you just flew and soared, and it is quite amazing. Speaking of the UK, though, we've seen this cover, this sort of masterpiece theater, Edward Gorey looking, marvelous, chic, stylish cover. But you have a different cover in the UK. You have that right there, right?
I do. Shall I show?
Please.
Okay, so the book is out in the UK in a little while. So it's January 20th in the UK. So here is their version of the Maid. So you can see there's a door hanger that they made, and they actually commissioned an artist to make this out of paper, and it's like all cut out in fine detail. So it's a totally different look for the book. But this is my real favorite part. They also did these incredible end papers where they featured the Regency Grand Hotel in all of its finest. And my favorite part of this edition is this title page. I'm going zooming right in. As you can see, there is a fly on the soap.
That's so great.
And I love it.
That is marvelous. That is so marvelous. And it makes the hotel seem so real. I mean, I feel as if I've been there after having read this book. I would know the hotel anywhere. Do you know Elaine Viets? Have you ever met Elaine Viets?
I have not.
Elaine Viets is an author of cozies who wrote cozies years ago, who had I promise you this as a point, who had a series called the Dead End Job series. And one of them featured a hotel maid. And she sort of raised all of our consciousness back then, 20 years ago ish, about that. And we all of the Elaine's pals now are very careful about leaving tips for hotel maids and being aware of hotel maids. And so I love that you're carrying on this tradition of this sort of being aware that there is someone who is working very hard to do something that you wouldn't want to do. And is being very diligent at it, and that we say thank you to maids, especially now that we're talking about that in the Maid. So that's marvelous. And the other marvelous thing in your life now is, come on, Nita, the movie. Tell us about that.
So it is pretty exciting, I would say. So Universal Pictures has optioned the film, and Florence Pugh, who of course starred in Black Widow and Little Women and Midsummer, maybe some of your people out there have heard of her. She is set to play Molly. I don't think there is a better Molly out there. I think she's going to do just an incredible job. I am so excited. I'm just so excited to see what can happen on the screen, for that, Art Deco splendor to come to life. For me, that is just it's just the ultimate dream. I can't say much else about the movie, but I can say this smile. Every time I talk about the movie, I cannot get this look off my face. I just can't do it because it's so exciting.
It's wonderful. It's cinematic. It's gorgeous. The characters are absolutely terrific, and the story is just such a good story. I think about movies, and it's wonderful, and it's going to be so exciting, and it'll be so much fun to see. But it is equally fun to read The Maid and envision the characters, and envision the hotel, and envision Molly's apartment in your own reader mind, because Nita, you bring it to life so completely gorgeously. Congratulations on this. Long may you write, and long may you shepherd other lucky writers to be able to work with you. Congratulations on this.
Oh, Hank, thank you so very much. And my goodness, it is so lovely speaking to you because I know you understand the ins and outs of what it takes to write. And so thank you for that
Well, as
insight.
well as I can, but you certainly do as well. Do you have time to hang out for
I
5
sure
more
do.
minutes and take some questions? We'd love to have some questions from you. Oh, Sylvia's saying, as the wife of, welcome, Sylvia. So nice to see you. As the wife of a hotel GM, I'm curious who you interviewed for research, front desk, housekeeping supervisors. Oh, that's a great question.
That is a really interesting question. So, as part of my editorial life, somebody who I worked with is a man named Charles the Butler, who has been a butler to some very, very big stars, and other people too, like royalty. So he's somebody I learned a whole lot from, and we worked together on 2 or 3 books. And I definitely have a lot of research that I cannot talk about that comes straight from Charles. Yeah, it was great. He was a great source of inspiration for me.
I was, you know me, I'm about to say, ooh, like what? And then I thought, she just told you she can't talk about that.
Can't. He would kill me.
Oh, we don't want that. We do not want that. Who else has a question today? Having worked says Sully, having worked in the industry and working with so many writers, was writing, oh, what a great question. Was writing a book harder than you expected?
Because I know the work that goes into it, I knew how hard it was. What I didn't know is just how vulnerable it would feel. So it was the feeling that I didn't, I knew to some extent, but there's a difference between having a theoretical understanding of somebody else's feeling and then feeling it yourself, right? And it's really the combination of both that creates empathy. So I have now a new understanding of just how much courage it actually takes to write on the page.
Do you think you'll deal with your authors in a different way as a result?
Oh, yeah. Oh, really? For sure. I mean, I was always aware of that tenderness, but now I have an extra special understanding of it.
Oh, that's lovely. That is fantastic. Who else has a question, you all? What is your favorite Agatha Christie book, says Robert Casas, and what are you currently reading? This what are you currently reading question is so hard.
At the moment, it's very hard. But Murder on the Orient Express, I think, is my very favorite. I love the claustrophobia of that. I love how she takes this tiny, tiny, tiny space and the characters become larger because the setting is so small. So I think that is my favorite one. And a book that I can say I'm rereading at the moment is Wahala by Nikki May. It is just coming out in the US in 2 days, I believe. It is a wonderful, caustic, funny, smart look at female friendships and frenemies. And it's by a Nigerian British writer who is going to be the thing in just a few minutes. And it is just wonderful.
Well, thank you. You heard it here first, you all. Let me quickly say that I think that Murder on the Orient Express was the book that made me want to be a writer.
Oh, wow.
And I remember, I think I read it when I was about 12. And I remember thinking, first of all, at the end, wait a minute, how did she do that? And going back to see how all the clues were there, how it's just completely fair. And again, your claustrophobia, the closed, the locked room story, which is sort of like The Maid. And also sort of like The Maid, with no spoilers, is that at the end, and no spoilers for Agatha Christie either, at the end of Murder on the Orient Express, there's a moral and ethical decision that Poirot makes, just as there's a moral and ethical decision that's made at the end of The Maid. So very interesting connection. Oh, Anita, hi Anita, is saying, how did GMA let you know The Maid was chosen? Kudos to you. And yes, indeed.
So it wasn't, I got an email. I mean, it's not very glamorous. Some aspects of writing life are not very glamorous. But I nearly fell off my chair. I think I had to read the email, like, I don't know, 3 or 4 times. And then of course I called my editors and started screaming. But that is how I found out.
That's great. It's just, when are you on GMA so we can all watch and cheer and say what
I believe I'm on January 14th.
Okay. and we'll watch and tell them what a good choice that was.
Oh, thank you.
The Maid by Nita Prose, such a marvelous book. And I forgot to tell you all, but you're all here, so you'll know. We are doing a giveaway of The Maid. So real fast, either say hello or congratulations or hooray or I love it or I can't wait to read it or thank you for everything or anything that you want to say, can't wait to see the movie or which cover you like that are really, really fast. And the Blazers in the back room will pick a winner before the end of today's show. Nita, what are your plans for the rest of the day?
I am going to go enjoy a very nice dinner in a little while, and I'm going to get ready to go to New York tomorrow. So I'm looking forward to that.
Well, you'll probably not even need an airplane to fly yourself to New York.
That's
You
true.
can just fly on the wings of your own happiness. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for being here today. We're so pleased to be here on your debut day and talk about this. Quickly, let me say, next Tuesday at 4 p.m., look who we have. Alafair Burke, who is such an excellent and terrific and brilliant author. We love Alafair Burke. This is her brand new book, and we will be talking about Find Me, another one of her incredible psychological thrillers with that special Alafair Burke way of writing. We love her style, and she is a terrific person. So cannot wait for you to meet Alafair Burke next week. And the winner of The Maid is Margaret Lang, Margaret Lang, you will love this. You will love this book. The rest of you go right now and get The Maid, and we hope you enjoy it, and I know you will. Congratulations, Nita. Safe travel.
Thank you so much. And thank you, all those readers out there. I know you're there, and it just means the world to me that you're reading the book.